that I think that Helen brought up earlier was the word sequel. And it's so funny that we're already tripping over PSD2 to PSD3. We've been talking about PSD2 for so many years. It's become such a landmark, and I'm really hoping that PSD3 is going to shape up in that same way. But before we get into that, let's kind of understand a bit about you. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and Currency Cloud, please?
Sure thing. And hopefully the move from PSD2 to 3 is literally just one number change. But let's see how many times we trip ourselves up in this session for the next few minutes. So yeah, just a bit of background about Currency Cloud. For those of you who haven't heard of Currency Cloud, we provide an FX, an international or cross-border payments platform that powers some of the leading and most progressive banks and FinTechs and FX brokers around the world, the likes of Revolut and Starling Bank or Standard Bank down in South Africa. And we allow those clients and their end customers to be able to collect, to convert, to hold multi-currency balances in 30 currencies, and also to pay out to about 180 countries and territories around the world every year. Probably more excitingly, at the end of 2021, we were acquired by Visa. And actually just last month at Sibos, we launched Visa Cross-Border Solutions, which is really the coming together of some of Visa's homegrown treasury as a service, cash management and cross-border capabilities with the platform that Currency Cloud has built over the past few years. So, we provide a variety of different solutions to meet different use cases that all revolve around the FX and international money movement capabilities.
Absolutely incredible.
And yeah, I'm as Helen said, I'm CPO at the Currency Cloud platform. I've been at Currency Cloud for about 6 years, Visa for almost 2 years. And before that, spent a fair bit of time in the global maritime tech industry, also in product management. So a complete industry shift.
Yeah, I mean, it's cross-border in a
exactly,
way. So
exactly.
And obviously, jumping into Currency Cloud at that point 6 years ago, we're talking PSD2 time. So you've been really shaped by, and it must have been such an important part of your career, all our careers. So it's very fascinating to actually see that journey. Piers, thank you so much for being opposite me here in this fireside chat. Now, we've set the scene with you, but now let's set the scene about the industry. And one thing that's so important about understanding PSD3 is to understand PSD2 and its impact. And as we just said, I can't think of someone better that was going to actually be better placed to tell us that impact. So could you briefly describe PSD2? I know that our audience here today are fully aware of it, but I think it's good to underline it. But more importantly, could you then go on to tell, in your view, its impact?
Perfect. Yes, always important to start with the context. So as Helen said, PSD2 stands for the Second Payment Services Directive. And actually, we've, as an industry, been talking about this for a long time. I think the first, it was released in I think, 2015, and it came into full effect at the start of 2018. And I suppose that, almost 6 years on now, actually, it gives us that ability to look back with hindsight and think about some of the impact and perhaps project forwards to think about what the impact of PSD3 might be going forward. Yeah. Really to boil a lot of words down into maybe 3 or 4 key pillars, PSD2 really was maybe perhaps implemented to attempt to revolutionize probably some of the payments industry. Real emphasis on making electronic transactions, money safer, allowing more innovation to kind of occur across the industry, and probably with a real focus on end customer needs. Really, as a product person, really coming back to what are the problems that end consumers or end customers actually have. What are the things that are still causing friction, and then looking for ways in which to solve, to remedy, to improve some of those things. There were probably a few key elements that came out of that. So from the security side, strong customer authentication, SCA was a fairly big milestone actually from a PSD2 perspective, really looking to improve some of the security on a digital transaction perspective. So we're all now used to that sort of multiple factor authentication that we've invariably got on our mobile phones. I I think another key area was from a competitive perspective. I think if we think back, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, there was a real intention to level that playing field between the traditional banking landscape versus perhaps the more emerging non-bank PSPs.
It was far more kind of, I don't want to use the word combative, but it was definitely, there was a competitive element in the air, wasn't there?
Certainly, I remember distinctly having lots of conversations at conferences and with banks about fintech perhaps being the enemy, which then became
apocalyptic
the
mode
back in sort of 2017, 2018. And that narrative really has moved on to one of cooperation and collaboration over the last few years, which has been amazing to see how some of that collaboration brings to life brand new experiences for customers. I think probably just the last thing to call out from a PSD2 impact perspective is open banking itself, right? There were other initiatives that helped bring this really to life, but PSD2 definitely paved the way for the way open banking has proliferated in the UK, especially, but also in the EU. We were talking about with Helen just now, actually, before this started, about the UK being considered an open banking mecca. Which is probably true if you think about the variety of new use cases that have emerged, the new ways in which we are solving for real life customer problems using open banking.
And with that in mind, I mean, it's such an exciting ecosystem to be a part of, and it's shown the impact that it's spawned a movement. As you said, I think that was your exact words. It's the open banking. You can call it what you want, see its successes, but to have a directive, have a regulation that has had such a brilliant impact on the whole industry has been so exciting, and I've certainly enjoyed being a part of that wave. But then, we've understood that wave. We've understood the movement. Let's get on the back of the bus and find out what it's going to change with PSD3 and PSR1. Maybe we could understand what that definition is, and that fact that PSD2 is now being enshrined into that regulation. And what is it designed to achieve? I think that's the most important thing. So that in 10 years' time, we'll know if it was a success. If we can state what it was designed to achieve at the beginning and how it differs from what we were previously working towards, I think that'd be a brilliant linchpin. I don't suppose, Piers, would you have that?
Let me attempt it. So I think there are various comments online that you might read about or see or hear about that talk about PSD3 perhaps being an evolution, not a revolution.
Okay.
But actually, when we're thinking about whether this will be a game changer or not, I think we again have to cast our minds back 5, 6, 7, 8 years and think about really the game changing that has happened because of PSD2. So I think, as Helen mentioned at the very start of this, the difference between a directive versus a regulation, between PSD3 versus PSR1, is quite crucial here, right? The regulation doesn't have to be transposed via or into 27 EU member states' different legislations and regulations. And that will have a positive impact on the way some of or all of the regulations are then harmonized and adhered to across the entirety of the Eurozone. But I think if we think about PSD3, I think there are again, if we think about what has happened over the past 5 or 6 years or so, the financial services landscape has dramatically changed with the digital acceleration post-pandemic, with the advent and probably the adoption to a certain extent of maybe crypto assets, with the rise of services like BNPL, the buy now, pay later offering. There are all sorts of new services, types of products that are being adopted and used more and more widely across the industry. And PSD3 really starts to incorporate some of those rapid changes that we've seen over the past few years into what will hopefully be that next wave of open banking, and perhaps moving much more definitively into an open finance world. Again, Helen touched on the importance of feeder and perhaps the journey that starts to help us on as an industry. But I do expect there to be with PSD3, some of those those other services, we will start to see with high levels of regulation, we will in turn start to see that level of consumer trust, that confidence in some of those services, which in turn will likely increase some of the adoption of certain of those services across the industry.
Absolutely amazing. And it's funny, you were hitting on similar notes that while you were reconnecting, Helen and I were taking on from what you're saying, and the fact that we're seeing increased product offering that is affecting the, what the customer is going to be expecting from PSD2 and PSD3. And the customer is getting generally more aware of it because of these new products that we're seeing. You mentioned crypto, but you also then touched on feeder. And I know we've got to move into the kind of panel session, so I'm only going to ask you for a very brief kind of roundup on this. But as you mentioned, Helen did bring up feeder, and I think it's going to be such a critical point to this new open finance evolution, apologies. So yeah, could you let us know about it before I bring in the rest of our panelists?
Again, yes, sure. FIDA, again, stands for the Financial Data Access, and it's a framework launched by the EU Commission. It was only launched or announced as a draft proposal in, I think it was June this year. But I like to think about it as sort of 3 concentric circles on this journey towards open data. PSD2 has really enabled that open banking in that first concentric circle. Yeah. FIDA, perhaps with PSD3, I think will pave the way to that open finance world. If you really extending this out, extending that journey out towards all sorts of other financial products and services. And the data access towards them, which is an absolutely key stepping stone towards that wider journey of open data, incorporating Definitely. Things like retail, healthcare data to give us a better picture of our digital financial lives.
I can't agree more. It really does showcase that. I mean, everyone always talks about data being the new oil, but it really is what powers this evolution. So I'm so excited to see what gaining that access is going to mean for so many really hungry individuals and organizations that want to be